I think the McCanns routinely sedated Madeleine, and that's not just based on things we've seen them say in their interviews, but also the subtext of Kate's book Madeleine, which takes great pains to point out just how loud Madeleine was, almost as if Kate is trying to convince herself that sedating Madeleine was justified. Is that your ween? Jerry's sister asked on hearing the 200 decibel screeching in the background. Madeleine was testing the extremities of her vocal range. She cried for the best part of each day for the first 4 months of her life. And here's the final, most concerning quote. A few days ago, I reacted to part of foreign detective Bernt Stellander's interview with James English. I liked a lot of what Bernt said, but his vagueness about actually capturing Kate and Jerry McCann on camera at Maddie's alleged burial site concerns me. So today, let's keep watching to determine if Bert has actually solved the case of Madeleine McCann, or is just being provocative to sell more copies of his book, The Sudden Impulse. I've not watched this yet. I wanted to do that with all of you, so let's go ahead and listen.
So we go right back. So what date did Kate and Jerry arrive in Portugal?
Oh, they were on April 28th.
And they were only there, supposed to be there for 1 week,
Yes.
holiday.
Yeah.
And their friends, 7 friends, 3 couples and 1 mother. Is that correct?
Mother of, yeah.
And how many other kids were in the group?
2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 3, I don't know, yeah.
Why is none of those people ever gave interviews?
Well, they had this meeting, of course, and they call it the Pact of Silence. But it comes, this is the biggest question I get when even from big media guys, Germany, Bild guy, is that they cannot understand why they would lie for them. And this has also tells you about the timing of things, the timeline. How far back can you pull it? Not just all the mistakes that were done and that points to it being pretty close up to the alleged disappearance, but it has to come a point of no return very quickly, right? For people not to turn on them. You get part of it, and that's occulting the body. You moving the body, get the body out of the apartment before cadaver scent starts to develop. They thought. I'll get into that later, maybe.
If you're not aware, this is my 23rd video analyzing the case of Madeleine McCann. And across all those videos, I've had 4 big questions, 2 of which I am interested in answering myself, and 2 of which I think are very simple to explain with basic human motivations. The first 2 are, if Madeleine died the same day they reported her missing, how did the parents have time to hide her and orchestrate their story? The second is, why was the British government so quick to send official liaisons to Portugal to protect these otherwise very average middle-class parents? So I am open to hearing what Bernt has to say about those. When it comes to the other 2 questions, though, I think people tend to gravitate towards the salacious explanations rather than explanations that are just purely based on average human motivations. The first is, did Christian Bruckner kidnap Madeleine McCann? The German government and German prosecutors really seem to think so. And personally, I think the reason they're so adamant about that is kind of just like Bernt and anyone else who analyzes this case. They want to be the ones to crack the case. And finally, we have this question. If the McCann's friends even had a small suspicion that they might have had a hand in her death or disappearance, why have they not come forward? And I think that can also be explained by human motivations. Coming forward against the McCanns has 0 upside. If you say they did it, you open yourself up to litigation. Moreover, their friends also open themselves up to potential charges if the McCanns are found guilty. They shared the duty of checking on the children every 30 minutes. And if they were derelict in that duty because they were all drinking and weren't actually checking as often as they said they were, they just put themselves into a position where they could also be charged with neglect. In other words, I don't think the McCann's friends have turned on them because there's no upside to doing it. The same way I think the German government has tried to pin the kidnapping on Christian B because there's only upsides to doing it. In other words, as long as Occam's razor can explain something, that's what I prefer to go with. There's no grand conspiracy, or Red Shoes Club, or abuser ring, or anything else required.
Maybe if you pull it up. But if I was their friend, and tragic thing happens, and then they risk losing the custody of the twins and their house and their jobs, I would lie for them, and I hate lying more than anything. But of course, not if SA is involved. I make a joke about it in the book. Then I would have been in Portuguese jail if somebody did that in my surroundings. But joke aside, but this is the thing, but it comes also a point of no return where it's not about throwing the McCanns under the bus. I mean, seeing from the friends' point of view, they started to lie for them, and then why haven't they turned? This is what I'm being asked all the time. Would these friends lie for them? And then you have the cover-up, So now you're not throwing the McCanns under the bus. You're looking up at the government that want to protect the cover-up, and that is the big thing. So they can keep you in check very easily, these friends. And they haven't spoken. So they had a meeting. It's called the secret meeting in Rothley, Pact of Silence. I think David Payne may have used those words to the media. And it's easier to sit still on the bus and let this. But they had no clue this was going so big, But in the night, you have a few glasses of wine. You have one of the children in one of the locked apartments fall behind the sofa, cracks her head. And one family is the lucky one. And that is where the chief in command, and he convinces everybody else that they're in the same boat and they got to help out. But they have already basically taken part, not all of them, of course, a few of them knowingly helping to get rid of the body. And then... for me, I found that the place was the cemetery. And this was based on Kate's words. And yeah.
The fascinating thing about this analysis is that many of my and Bert's disagreements aren't incompatible. For example, he says that the McCanns and their friends had this secret meeting in Rothley where they all decided not to turn on each other. Personally, I do believe there was omerta, but I don't believe that it required some secret clandestine meeting in Rothley. If we just look at it as people acting in their own self-interest, it makes sense. Friends typically don't turn on their other friends in a time of need, especially if there's no proof. And if they were drinking, like he said, everyone was drinking wine. So if you start accusing the McCanns of being negligent, the police might start inquiring as to what you were doing to watch your own toddlers. Another quote-unquote disagreement that Bert and I and many of my commenters seem to have is how Madeleine died. I say that the parents sedated her, and that's why they hid the body, because they didn't want an autopsy done and have sedatives found in their daughter, because that could open them up to charges negligent homicide, murder one even. Meanwhile, Bert and many other analysts seem to think that Madeleine died by climbing up on the couch while she was looking for her parents, since they left her, a 3-year-old, alone in the room at night, and fell behind the couch, cracked her head, and died of positional asphyxia. And these are not actually mutually exclusive. Madeleine could very well have climbed up on the couch and died of positional asphyxia, and the parents then came in, discovered her that way, and determined that they need to hide the body because if they call the police and an autopsy is done, the sedatives will be found in her system and could potentially be determined to have contributed to the death, opening them up once again to charges of homicide, neglect, negligence, recklessness, any number of things. What I really want to listen to Bert talk about is the government protecting the McCanns, because I am not blind. I also agree that it's very peculiar how quickly they sent officials like Clarence Mitchell to help the McCanns protect themselves in Portugal. In fact, I've done an entire video about Clarence Mitchell and just how qualified he was. That said, it does not mean there's some sort of global conspiracy. It could just be something as simple as the case was already getting a lot of attention in the press, and the British government didn't want a negative outcome, so they sent someone to help them.
Yeah, because if there's a child goes missing you're going to be screaming it from the rooftops. You're going to be coming forward, and everybody's going to be speaking out, doing as many interviews as you can, pleading for help.
Yes.
That's where the question. That's why I think it's becoming so. People are. It's not even conspiracy theories. It's people are just so intrigued by it because it's so many question marks unanswered. The doctors, the kind of well-to-do people, but I'm going off course. But if you look at kind of Prince Andrew, you look at Epstein. Epstein's an own fucking paedophile. Prince Andrew was still going to meet him. Why? Did they have something over him? It's the same as these people. If you're not coming forward and you're trying to do secret agreements and silent this and silence that, then what do they have over each other? And that's the questions. And I could be wrong as well, but it's just the way it looks. It looks very suspicious. So we're there in Portugal, because even the videos though, and like I say, you've got to give Kate and Jerry credit as well, because even their videos of their kids and in their home, there seems to be lots of toys. The kids seem to be having fun. Like, they don't seem like bad parents. Obviously, they neglected their kids, obviously, but when you look at the interviews, Jerry's asked a question about, do you feel bad for leaving your daughter? And he's saying, yeah, but millions of people have messaged me saying they do the same thing. And it's like, justifying. You left your daughter, admit you should never have done it. 2 years old and 3 years old, there's kids in that room, should never be left alone at that age, because they can wake up any minute, any time. You could have put them in the pram and had them sit next to you. It just, there's, like I say, we'll get into everything, but just seems messy. So you're saying the 1st of May, holiday's going great. Was there any suspicions from any other of the tourists with their behaviour or anything odd?
You mean after that?
No, during the holiday.
It's actually, they don't speak about that, but that's because the media machine of the McCanns, and Clarence Mitchell in charge of that, of course, is to speak only about what happened from May 3rd and onwards. Never look back. And this is basically Kate, she did it herself. She said she had to be like a detective, and making sure to fill all the gaps from May 3, right? Don't look back to May 2. But then again, she did a big mistake, in my opinion, because a mother, having read to her child, a bedtime story in that book, if you're happy, whatever, and you have a chance to go back in time, what would you do? Every mother in the world would say that, I wish I was there in the bed reading for her, and just, I didn't go for dinner that night, because then she wouldn't have been taken. But what does Kate do? She wants to go back to the day before, only for 1 hour.
We've actually analyzed the exact statement Bernt appears to be talking about in my video, What Does an Embedded Confession Look Like? And my opinion is that almost everything Kate said about that evening, after saying she and Madeleine did toilet teeth, is made up, and that includes the song Happy and You Know It. And this was actually caught by one of my eagle-eared subscribers, Karma Candle 49, who pointed out that that is the last song a parent would want their kids to sing right before they tuck them into bed, because the next lyrics after that verse are, if you're happy you know it, clap your hands. In other words, it's not a bedtime song. It's actually a very energized song. Could Kate and 3-year-old Madeleine and the 2-year-old twins have all sang that in the same room and then immediately gone to bed? Possibly. It could happen. But it either suggests that the kids were sedated, which is why they were able to fall asleep after such a raucous song, or that Kate made up that part of the story because she was concealing what actually happened. So when Bernt said that he thinks Kate is being deceptive about what happened on that evening, I agree with him. I don't think she's telling the full story.
And take notes and watch them watching them, you see? So her priority is to convince us that somebody was looking to abduct a child instead of trying to avoid the abduction itself. Isn't that strange?
Yeah.
It shows the priority. It's self-preservation and conviction, convincing us that there was someone had been watching them days ahead.
Mm-hmm. Because the thing that breaks my heart, I think it was the 2nd of May, they say it's the 2nd of May, Madeleine was crying for over 1 hour. Kate and Jerry's admitted that the night before.
Yeah,
why?
Two nights earlier.
2 nights earlier. Yeah.
On Tuesday, May 1st. Yeah.
Madeleine's crying for over 1 hour.
Yeah.
Kate and Jerry's admitted that. Why did you leave me? Why didn't you come when I called? But yet the same night they've done the same again.
There is a interesting phone call from Kate to a friend back home. I think she was a pathologist. And my interpretation of that information is that when Mrs. Fenn upstairs had heard the crying increasingly for 75 minutes on the Tuesday, May 1st, that the next day, these phone calls, that Kate wanted to increase the dosages, right? And it's been speculated about overdose. And of course, it affects a child climbing a sofa, standing a meter away from the window because there's a big drop outside. It's like a safety precaution and that she probably reached. And, you know, we might get into those technical things later. But that the dosage thing, and also the liquid in the rental car that was found was said by Amaral to contain very high dosage of sedatives.
So if the kids, so they said they were checking on the kids every half hour. Is that incorrect?
Yeah, but there's so many stories, and they changed their stories about this thing because there was an interviewer suggesting to Jerry that they checked every 15 minutes, and then he says, "Whoa, hey, wait a minute! It's purported that we're checking every 30 minutes." And they only checked on their own. And all of a sudden, they have friends checking on them. We'll get into that too. But on this is interesting about the May 2nd, is that Russell listened outside of the bedroom window. This is one of the big ones that catches it for me. He's listening 11 p.m. on May 2nd. And then Kate and Jerry, actually, Jerry had been watching football, the Champions League match with Manchester United, Milan. And Kate had been moaning, and she probably gave a comment or something by the dinner table. So he ran off, and she followed him by 5 minutes. This is their story, okay? They arrived at the apartment 11:45. So 45 minutes after Russell had checked. And then Kate also said that they didn't check for 45 minutes. And then she said if she could only for 1 hour go back and to avoid she had this statement in the video presentation you've probably seen.
Regarding Kate expressing regret, that's also something we've picked up on in the interviews that we've analyzed of her. And it's one reason I think that she's the one who administered the sedatives that ended up killing Madeleine. Whereas the McCanns constantly speak in the plural we about everything, Kate always switches to I when she's expressing a regret about something, a decision that was made that evening. And I think that's because she can't put that blame onto Jerry. It's her own. I also think that's the reason she stopped practicing medicine after this incident, and Jerry didn't. And why Jerry seems to be the one who took charge in hiding the body and fabricating the story. Kate was despondent, and Jerry had to go into fight mode, so he didn't really have time to be sad and distraught the same way Kate was.
But the interesting thing is that Russell, when he goes and gives a statement to Leicestershire a year after, and he's reading over his own statement, he says the following: "I would like to remove the word too. It was too well when he checked on 11 p.m. because it sounded ominous about something is about to happen, right? But why would he care about his check the day before if she was snatched the day after? You see? So he's very self-aware about not leading up to and telling, because he knows that if he was too well, it can never be too well. It's either quiet or it's not, right? When you're checking on the children. So there's so many fascinating aspects that of course, you know, the book is very thick, but the way there's been a lot of interesting people that has written books, done the analysis. They haven't seen all the things that I see, but it's about how you put it together, and then you put the puzzles there in the right places and everything makes sense. And this is the amazing thing about The Night Before. Everything makes sense based on that. But I didn't decide that time and then make everything fit. It was more a surprise that everything was pointing to this. And of course, when I was aware of that, basically from a comment of Jane Tanner, then all of a sudden it appears. This is the thing about it. When you have a lot of material, it's very hard to find something, but when you look for something, you actually see it. And this is one of these things. And Jane Tanner's comment was, of course, about the football. They were doing this reconstruction video.
Who is she?
Jane Tanner, the friend who saw the abductor.
She said she'd seen someone carry a child at 9:15.
Yes. And then she said...
That's the girl, was it the Tapas 7 they call them? The 7 friends who were at the Tapas?
Yeah. So
just
Jane Tanner,
from the room.
So she allegedly walks past Jess Wilkins and Jerry around 9:15, and she sees the abductor. But then she, in the reconstruction video, she says that if you would have been looking at me, she's talking to Jerry, I would have said something like, Kate's been moaning since you've been gone a long time watching football. But there was no football then. There had been 2 Champions League on May 1st and the 2nd. And so Jane basically put me on, hey, let's look at the football. There was no football. There was some Europa League, Sevilla against somebody else. But then when you have Liverpool playing on the 1st and then Manchester United on the 2nd, you bet Jerry's been watching those 2, right? So that's what started it with me. That was Jane's comment. And then when you see that reconstruction video, Jerry's reaction to that is like, whoa. That was something that didn't, and then she's crying after, but she's looking down at Jerry because she knew she stepped in the salad,
So the 3rd of May is when Kate and Jerry says Madeleine was abducted. Again, something sticks out as with when Kate went back to the room, as soon as Madeleine wasn't there, she's just started screaming, my daughter's been abducted. Now, bear in mind, the window's still open. She's still got her twins in the room. She's ran straight out and saying Madeleine's been abducted. Like, how can you just come to that conclusion straight away? Like, that doesn't stick out. Plus, you've got your other kids in the room.
What James is saying here is the crux of this case and every hoax we've analyzed on the channel. People who fabricate a hoax know more than they should if their story were true. For example, Kate said that immediately she knew Madeleine had been abducted, which just isn't the case. If your kid's missing, you don't know if they're hiding or if the friend who checked on the room right beforehand took her out of bed and put her in with his kid because she was crying and forgot to mention it, or she wandered out the open door looking for her mom. And then you have all the issues of plot holes, the same way Kate said they were singing Happy If You Know It before she put them to bed. Remember, even Hollywood blockbusters with unlimited budgets, scriptwriters, time, proofreads still have plot holes. And the fact that Kate says she ran out of the room knowing her daughter was kidnapped yet left her other 2 children alone in the room is a plot hole. If someone's actually in that situation, we could expect them to think about their other 2 children before they ran out of the room. Finally, we've actually analyzed this statement in one of my previous videos in my McCann series. And Kate didn't say, like James is saying here, that she started screaming immediately. She only started screaming once she got to the tapas bar. In other words, she only started screaming once she had an audience. And that's not typically how parents who are actually in shock act. They start screaming out of shock. And typically, I would expect them to start screaming for Madeleine. Madeleine, where are you? Not, my daughter's been kidnapped. If you've ever lost your kid in a supermarket or at the mall, you'll know that the first thing you scream is their name. You don't run up to the food court and then announce to an audience of people that your kid has been kidnapped. If you're not aware, I've compiled my 52 favorite rules for spotting lies and manipulation into the Deception deck. And on your screen right now is the card for spotting hoaxes. And besides the conclusiveness, which I've already gone over, there are a few other things that hoaxers have in common, like reticence. In other words, hoaxers are unwilling to be upfront with all their evidence because they don't actually have it, whereas people who are telling the truth present their evidence freely. And vagueness. In other words, hoaxers are typically very vague about the proof of what they're claiming because they don't want to be pinned down to details which can be fact-checked. Or they just haven't gone through all the effort of thinking up all the details. The irony is, these are my 2 big problems with Bernt's claim that he's found Madeleine's burial site.
You would make sure they were protected. And even you would look about the room or the hotel for Madeleine's missing. You would never come to the conclusion straight away that she's been abducted. So that stinks straight away. So is she saying she went to the room, the window was open, Madeleine wasn't there? Is this what Kate's saying?
Yeah. And then she went down to the restaurant and said, they've taken her. So who are they? And taken, instead of saying Melanie. But she left the twins. This is the thing, without shutting and closing and locking the window first, which was cold. But so she left the twins and went down. But, you know, this is the thing. It's so absurd that it only makes sense when you know the truth, you know, that they faked the abduction the next day. I mean, on the 3rd. And that Maddie had the accident on the late night of evening of May 2nd.
So when you talk about the accident, are you saying Kate and Jerry's possibly drugged their kids to make them sleep so they can go and party? Because I know people have said Madeleine's fell off the couch or the sofa, banged her head and passed away. Is that correct?
Well, based on the forensic finding of the liquid in the rental car, but also how the twins were treated. You know, they've slept through the whole thing, the commotion of everything, with people coming into the bedroom, and people have seen Jerry and Kate actually shaking the twins. But also, I think Fiona and Russell were sent to the bedroom to check if the twins were breathing. So why wouldn't you take them to the doctor then to check if they suspected an abductor having sedated them? No, it's because they probably gave them more from after the crying on the May 1st. That they were afraid that somebody would discover that they were drugged, right? But the police took note of that they didn't. And of course, the parents suggested a drug test later after it was out of the system, weeks later, instead of doing it right away. So all the behavior, like you said, it doesn't match anything. And people say, oh, but you don't know how it is to lose a child. But it's nonsense. You have the instinct. You close the window, you lock it. You go on the patio if you want to leave the room, the bedroom, just to shout across the pool, Jerry, or something. Just scream, Jerry, come. Right?
See, for drugging the kids, is that so they can drink and party, or is there a possibility they were drugging the kids and abusing them also?
I don't speculate what's going on, and you know, it's irrelevant for me. It was like I only wanted to find the remains, and then I had the timeline, and that changes everything because it's all about the impossible abduction. And Jane wasn't even there to see the Tenderman and how much weight they put on their own abductor.
I think the McCanns routinely sedated Madeleine, and that's not just based on things we've seen them say in their interviews, but also the subtext of Kate's book Madeleine, which takes great pains to point out just how loud Madeleine was, almost as if Kate is trying to convince herself that sedating Madeleine was justified. Here's a couple quotes I posted in the forum. Upon Madeleine's birth, she screamed straight away, something we get used to over the next 6 months. Is that your ween? Jerry's sister asked on hearing the 200 decibel screeching in the background. Madeleine was testing the extremities of her vocal range for a large part of it. She cried for the best part of each day for the first 4 months of her life. Unfortunately for Madeleine, colic could strike at any time. I remember feeling so helpless as I tried everything I could think of to ease her pain. Kate includes a long list of things she tried, but I wonder if she omitted sedation. And here's the final most concerning quote. Madeleine seemed to have an aversion to sleep. It still astonishes us that she could survive on so little. How does one go on a vacation with a child like that? Regarding the allegations of abuse of a sexual nature, I take the same position that Bernt does about the frequency of sedation. It's irrelevant. Committing a crime and lying to the public about it, and then going on to raise money based on that lie, is enough to put you in my crosshairs, regardless of what else might have been going on.
What do you need if you fake an abduction? You need somebody seeing someone carrying a child. It's ABC, right? These are not criminals, but that's what anybody could come up with. And that was the thing. And they kept the nonsense of the Tannerman, even though Jane wasn't even there.
Was there cameras at the hotel in this year, 2007?
No.
Why not?
It's Portugal. They don't have CCTV, and it's illegal to film the street, the public areas. You could have on the internal hallways and stuff, and maybe even there was somewhere, some places on the more modern facilities, but you're not allowed to have like street view where anybody can be seen, I think.
But that's a perfect
Yeah.
spot then for paedophiles and criminals then.
Yeah.
Because that area not a kind of hot zone for predators?
Nah,
Or is that just fabricated?
Yeah, no, I mean, in history, you could probably, there were some cases about this, but the thing about the rumors that the law wasn't protecting children enough there and stuff, I don't know. I'm sure there were, I haven't done research on all that, but I know what's been said about pedophile rings operating there. It's like in any lower development countries, like pre-EU, Portugal, probably. But this, I don't speculate too much about these things.
What about, so she screamed abduction, but there's apparently phone calls. Instead of phoning the police or the hospital, she's contacted the media in the UK. How true is that?
Well, what they did, they went to the bedroom and they didn't even search physically themselves. And they were deleting text messages, and especially from the day before, I heard, from May 2nd.
But surely they can be,
and early,
they can still be searched if they've deleted them or not.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's all sorted. But what the point is, if your parents, first of all, the initial search, you had Jerry pretending to search in the playground area at the hotel, even though they said Jane hadn't said that she saw someone carrying a child away on the backside. But that's the only direction they would search, right? But then Jane said that they didn't tell about her observation until 1 a.m., which is absurd, right? They're looking and she's missing and she saw something. And then her story, I mean, Jane told Russell, her man, that she had never been more certain of anything in her life. So why wouldn't she say that right away then? It doesn't make sense. But this is fiction. That she saw someone take Madeleine away, right? Mm-hmm. So it's absurd.
So do you believe that's made up? Just
yeah. The problem was the timeline. She was supposed likely to go, because they had 2 written timelines, which was a rehearsal for the next day. It wasn't to help the police. And Matt had an inside check, allegedly, and it was on the first written timeline, but it was removed on the second written timeline. It was like open space. So I think he hesitated to go and check and not look around the corner to see if Maddie was there. It didn't make sense to him. But they wanted somebody, a third person, check between the father and the mother, right? Before the alarm. But it was also, I think, implemented to push the alarm half hour later to 10 p.m. because they were searching around 9:30 p.m.
A quick note about this guy, Matt. If your kid goes missing right after another adult who's unrelated to your kid checked the room, that would be suspect number 1. No matter how awkward it might be between you, you would at least confront them about it. The McCanns never did that, which goes right back to conclusiveness. They never suspected Matt of taking Madeleine because they knew Matt didn't take Madeleine. If you've seen my video, What Do Innocent Parents Look Like?, you'll have a good reference point for just how curious and suspicious actual innocent parents are, whereas hoaxers don't have that same level of curiosity, even if they're trying to pretend they do, because it's just not there. They know what happened.
They adjusted this very strangely. And this is why Matt, I think, is a weak link here. I mean, he's active part of the lie, of course. But he didn't want, but they convinced him during the next night, I mean, the May 3rd night, to go to the police on the 4th and say that he actually did that inside check, which he didn't. And I can prove it.
What time did they report it to the police?
Yeah, it was like 10:41.
And do you believe the incident happened on the Tuesday? The day before?
Accident, yes.
Do you believe she was dead the day before?
Yes.
And they've cleaned it up?
Yes.
Nobody can verify that they never seen her on the 3rd? Or, you know what I'm saying? If they're saying she was there on the 3rd, she was abducted on...
That's the only thing, it's the last photo.
No one ever came forward to say she wasn't playing it. Because there must have been a play part. There must have been other families.
This is the nanny story. And this is what... So here's what happened. When Christian Bruckner, the German suspect, was pulled out of the hat, I sent an anonymous email to the prosecutor, the state attorney in Germany, and to his defense lawyer, Friedrich Filscher. And Friedrich responded, and he came down, and he was in my mezzanine reading my first draft of the book, 4 days. And then he said, if they charge him, I want you next to me in court in Germany, and we'll take these people in for questioning, the Tapas 9. And they have to answer, sit alone in the center and answer a German judge. And the German prosecutor, he didn't respond, Walters. So I lost my thread.
Yeah, you were talking about the German man, and you showed him your draft of the book, and the Tapas 9 could have been charged. We spoke about, did anybody see Madeleine on the Third playing at the park or anything?
Yeah. Well, okay. Back to the last photo, which wasn't the last photo. The poolside photo, which is called the last photo, the poolside photo with Jerry and Maddie and one of her siblings. So that was likely taken on the Sunday. So the only, well, okay, this is about Friedrich Filscher. So the biggest bomb for him was what I did with the nanny, breaking that down, because she was, of course, the witness that said that we were on the beach with Maddie on the Thursday, okay? But she did something, and this is also very interesting in terms of statement analysis, because Kat Baker, the nanny, she said that I and Maddie and 4 or 5 other lobster children went down to the beach. Why would she be uncertain if there were 5 or 6 total children going down to the beach? You're a nanny. You do a head count. You know exactly. And you've been the whole week with them. And there were 6 children signed in. So why would she be uncertain to being 5 or 6? That was a big lead for me. And then I saw chronologically what she claimed to have happened at the beach. And this is interesting because the first time she was asked on May 6th, she said that Maddie never cried and or showed discontent with anything, okay? And this is very interesting. So this is May 6th.
All right, now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of his timeline. Like I said, I personally think they don't need to have had an extra day. Madeleine could have died on the evening that they reported her missing, because in extreme situations, people can be extremely creative. If it's life or death, you could shove your daughter's body into a freezer. And I've seen plenty of comments of people saying that the freezer in the room had to be replaced, so they could have stashed her and could have moved her away at a different point in time. That said, I've not analyzed the nanny's statements, so I think Bernt is going to break it down for us, and let's see if it's convincing. We're about an hour in, so let's wrap up this video here. If you want me to do part 3, let's get this video to 50,000 views. You can also become a channel member to vote on who we analyze next. If you want to see why I think Christian Bruckner is a convenient fall guy, click the video on your screen now. Until next time, stay true.